that some of them have bases here. They have supplied us with some new technology, including actual alien vehicles. I know it's wild stuff, but that's what I've been told from very reliable sources.
More in a minute. It's 11:20. Known about and even worked with alien beings who have landed and have alien spacecraft, otherwise known as UFOs, under guard, and have even had some technology passed on to them. It's difficult to believe.
Yes, I agree entirely. But that doesn't mean to say it isn't true. Many extraordinary things were first ridiculed. If you take atomic energy, microchip technology, flight.
This is the biggest yet.
I think this is the biggest yet. This is the story of the millennium, no question.
Will it come out this millennium?
I sincerely hope so, and I'm working towards that end.
You're working, I mean, I know you're traveling to the States very shortly
yes.
and meeting people in the Senate and so forth who are involved in this.
Yes, I am.
A lot of money is being spent by the U.S. government. You can say as an incontrovertible fact, a lot of money is being spent by the U.S. government on UFO research.
Huge sums of money are being set aside in what are called black budgets. Those are black budgets which officially do not exist. And senators and congressmen do not have access to what the money is being actually spent on.
Presidents know about it.
Yes, they do. Particularly presidents like George Bush, because he's a former director of Central Intelligence. Also...
So that man who comes on the television and is so reasonable and says, watch my lips and all that stuff, he knows about UFOs and has very possibly seen an unidentified flying object that has landed. He's very...
I don't know
very
if he
possibly
has.
seen
I think
one.
It's quite likely, yes. I think he's seen one of the recovered vehicles. Now, it's interesting also that North American Aerospace Defense Command, otherwise known as NORAD, actually tracks these things every single day, in addition to tracking thousands of conventional space objects. According to Bob Exler, this NASA engineer friend of mine, he visited a secret NORAD facility in the Gulf of Mexico, where he was shown UFOs being tracked, and some of them apparently landing. This was on a huge screen. And the UFOs were not labeled UFO or flying saucer or anything. They were labeled ASC, which apparently means alternative spacecraft. So clearly, the American defense authorities are spending huge sums of money on tracking and monitoring these things as well, on a daily basis.
I suppose the reason could be that if we were told, or if we knew about aliens, it undermines the very fabric of our hierarchical system.
Absolutely.
If we think the people leading us, and they are infinitely inferior to these beings.
Yes, I think it could lead to an almighty inferiority complex.
Exactly.
Which is why it's best that this information comes out very gradually. We've got to come to terms with it eventually. I think even most skeptical astrophysicists acknowledge that there have probably been visitations in the past. They may think they're out of the question at the moment, but certainly in the future we are going to come into contact with alien beings.
Speculation in the book, talking about presidents, President Eisenhower met an alien.
In 1954, the story goes, according to a man called Gerald Light, who subsequently wrote a report about it, Eisenhower was spirited away during a vacation in Palm Springs in California one night and actually was taken to a hangar at what was then called Muroc Air Force Base, where he was shown a number of extraterrestrial vehicles. Now, that's a wild story, but it's interesting that Gordon Cooper, the astronaut and ex-pilot, ex-Air Force pilot, who himself has chased flying saucers, metallic flying discs, when he was back in 1951, when he was in Germany, he's confirmed that when he was director of the Flight Test School at Edwards Air Force Base, which used to be called Muroc, where Eisenhower is alleged to have met these beings. He says that a flying saucer actually landed outside the base and was filmed by one of his camera crews. He didn't see the flying saucer land, but he's seen the film, and he said it was absolutely the real thing.
Government's getting very touchy about this, obviously, and very sensitive.
But understandably.
For the reasons that we've, reasons that we've underlined,
It is highly embarrassing to have to admit even some of these facts. And the admission of just a part of what is going on here is going to open the floodgates, precisely. It's going to lead to a deluge of embarrassing questions.
So people like yourself, like Bob Exler, like Lazar, Bob Lazar, and he's given you a lot of information. These guys who are physicists and ex-NASA scientists who've given you a lot of information for this book. The government won't be very pleased with them, the US government, will it? Have they had serious threat to their lives?
Certainly. Bob Lazar was threatened when he first made public disclosure, with quite anonymously, by the way. I mean, but his voice, his voice could be heard, but his face was blacked out. Back in March of 1989, he was threatened over the telephone. His wife was threatened. He was shot at. He nearly had a very serious accident because his back tire and back brake were
They were just trying to get him to back off.
Yes. But he says that now he's come out with the information, there's really very, very little they can do except deny it if faced with a deluge of questions.
So are you starting this process?
I like to think that I'm a part of it. I'm calling their bluff. We keep getting these intimations from authorities that they're going to release information. This has happened about 2 or 3 times in the past.
People like you pressing and putting pressure on.
Well, I hope it will facilitate the release of information at a public level by the sort of stuff that's in my book.
And do you
I hope so, anyway.
Do you think it'll all come out by the year 2000?
I sincerely hope so. I'm not a prophet, though.
Well, Tim Good, thanks for coming in tonight.
Thank you.
It's just gone 11:30. More comment after the news. Right now, Simon Leach.
The IRA has shot dead a soldier in East Belfast. He was the second soldier to...
Or was it a load of hogwash? Is it worthwhile following up tomorrow night? I think if you give me the go-ahead, I can get Bob Exler on the line. He's the ex-NASA scientist. We can hear his views on the telephone. And he's got some interesting tales to tell. And also, with a bit of luck, Bob Lazar as well, who is the ex-NASA physicist who operated 38 levels above top secret and has, or claims to have, worked on the propulsion unit of a recovered craft, i.e. a UFO, has worked on and examined one of these vehicles. So basically, is it worth a follow-up? 07163743343. Is it worth a follow-up, or is it best left forgotten? You make the decision now, and I'll take your votes in the next 15 minutes.
Ongoing dialogue today, but of course that didn't preclude that there might have been some in the past. So, and again, he also qualified the fact that he had been out of that business for 7 years at the time. This was in 1989 when we had that conversation.
Now, when you were with NASA, what was the best evidence that you saw of the existence of these alien craft and these aliens here?
Well, when I was at NASA, I had actually no involvement whatsoever other than my involvement with regard to the robot arm interface project, which was a development by a Canadian firm, and of course I worked on the International Ultraviolet Explorer mission and the Apollo-Soyuz test project. I was not aware of any NASA involvement with extraterrestrial phenomena or UFOs, if you will, at that time. I was, before that, in the Air Force and stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, where it has been alleged that craft and bodies were stored there. All I can say during my tenure in the Air Force and my assignment at that location is that the capacity does exist for that to occur there. There's a lot of underground facilities located there, as a matter of course for the purpose of stockpiling munitions and so on to get it out of missiles' way. So certainly the capacity would exist to have that sort of operation going on there, but I did not personally at that time have any knowledge of those activities.
Tell me about this anti-gravity chamber, which doesn't officially exist, does it?
Well, no, I'm sure it does not officially exist, and that was quite a surprise to me. The only reason I ended up involved with that was as part of the training on this Cosmic Journey project with regard to interfacing the shuttle arm. You see, the central process of this Cosmic Journey project, the center of the exhibit, was a full-scale mock-up of the shuttle. And what they wanted to do was to make that publicly interactive so that children, for example, could go up into the control room that operates the shuttle arm and could actually manipulate the arm so that it could pick up a payload package like a mock-up satellite and deploy it out of the shuttle bay. Well, this required some significant modifications to the current known shuttle arm project. And as a result of that, there was a learning process. Since the original arm was designed to operate in a zero-gravity environment of space, we were talking about configuring this arm to be able to operate in a gravity environment now. So in order for me to get an understanding of the specifics of exactly how this arm operated in a microgravity environment, I was taken to this facility near Houston, and I had the occasion to spend several hours in this chamber that was, in effect, a microgravity chamber. And what I found there was rather extraordinary, aside from the work that I did on a miniature mock-up of the shuttle arm to examine the various types of stress and strain that was designed into the system and into back-engineer it, if you will, into a gravity environment. I found, amongst other things, some experiments that I was familiar with, one of which was a protein crystal experiment I'd heard a great deal about on one of the previous Discovery shuttle missions, where they were doing some preliminary tests for the Space Station Freedom project. And it's clearly evident that the promotion for the Space Station Freedom project was rather intriguing in light of the fact that they were trying to promote it as a necessity for manufacturing in a suborbital environment where you would have a gravity situation much different than it is here on the surface of the Earth.
So what I'm asking you is, this is all sounding a bit technical to me. Does any of this technology come from extraterrestrials?
Well, clearly my impression was that in this facility, I know of no way that we have in current technology to create a microgravity environment here on the surface of the Earth. Yet here I was confronted with a chamber that clearly had those specifications. And in addition to that, what I saw as the light, what appeared to clearly was a light source for this environment, was something that I could never seen. It was almost as if you were standing inside of a fluorescent light bulb tube. And that was the atmosphere effect that you got. Everything was radiated brilliantly bright all around you. And the only other place I've ever seen that form of technology is in association with these craft, much like the craft that Bob Lazar will talk about tonight in his experience out at the S4 site.
Right, well listen, I'm going to play a record and come back to you and speak to you more in a couple of minutes, because I know that you've seen photos of alien bodies and have also had an extraordinary encounter with an alien. I'd like to speak about that, and it'll be in a couple of minutes, okay, Bob?
Okay.
All right. Which is, well, almost certainly alien technology, which has been borrowed by the US government, this microgravity chamber, which doesn't officially exist.
Yes, indeed. And although we don't know for sure that it was derived from alien technology, Bob is certainly convinced of that. I mean, he was practically floating in this chamber.
Hello, Bob, you still there?
Yes, I am.
You were floating around in this chamber, having a great time.
Well, when I first stepped into the chamber, which was much like a hatchway into a compartment on a sea vessel, it was as if you were suddenly airborne. In fact, the effect on the muscles was rather extraordinary. It's almost as if you could envision yourself suddenly appearing in the middle of a swimming pool, you'll note that your arms tend to swing out to your sides, and your muscles react entirely different than they do under normal gravity conditions. But the clothing, and especially the kind of cloth cover for the shoes that we had on, had an interaction with the floor surface itself, so that it was almost as if it was kind of tacky, not quite Velcro with a tug, with a pull, but certainly a non-skid, and it tended to give you somewhat of a balance, something to establish your balance.
Right, listen.
Maintain an upright stature.
Right, listen, Bob.
You weren't just essentially floating and flipping head over heels. It wasn't quite like that.
Now, I know that you have seen, this really gets to the nitty-gritty. The technical stuff is interesting, obviously. It's fascinating. But you have actually seen, and these are highly secret, you've seen photos of some of these alien bodies, right?
Well, I did see one photograph of what was at least offered to me as being a genuine alien creature, much like the popular Greys have been depicted. And for those who are unfamiliar with Greys, it's not terribly unlike the E.T. creature in the movie E.T. Slightly different, but more along that line. And it was in I guess, kind of like a coffin, sort of a tank, a rather exquisite-looking chamber.
But you've no evidence to suggest that this is genuine, no real evidence?
No, nothing, because I didn't see it. I was looking at photographs, of course, and photographs could clearly have been a mock-up or something, like they can do with Hollywood, clearly.
But you indeed have had an extraordinary encounter with an alien. What happened?
Well, that particular incident really had its genesis in a visit I had to the Pentagon, which was on a Monday, and I was told by this general, first of all, I was surprised that the general knew I was going to be in Dallas that Friday, and he indicated that he would have arranged to have someone meet me in Dallas. I did not have the impression that he was referring to anyone other than human at the time. But what makes the connection for me was that when I visited the Pentagon, I had to walk through this doorway sort of device, much like the security doorways you walk through at the airport for metal detectors and so on.
Yeah.
Only the problem was when I walked through this doorway, it was as if I had walked through like a screen door, only which is impossible, obviously. However, you couldn't possibly walk through a screen device, but yet that was the feeling that as if a mesh fiber of some sort had passed completely through my body as I walked through this device. And the result of that was a rather strange tingling sensation in the back of my skull, right at the base of the neck. And it made me quite woozy, to be honest, and I was a bit disoriented from the experience. Well, in order to connect that, when I was in Dallas that evening, and I was in the accompaniment of an associate, I had a rather strange encounter with an individual who had come into in the room that I was in a lounge, and he was about 30 feet away from me. The lighting was not very good, in as much as that there was a light in the ceiling behind him, so I was getting more of a silhouette view until he actually turned and left, and then I could see the side of his face, and I only saw him from about the chest up to the top of his head.
How do you know he was an alien?
Well, the event actually started with a strange series of vibrations that I could feel, and strangely enough, my associate didn't seem to be able to feel these vibrations, and no one else in the room appeared to take notice of it. And then the vibrations became more and more intense to the point where I could actually focus on the origin of the vibrations. And just about the moment that I focused on the origin of the vibrations, this same form of tingling sensation occurred in the back of my head, and suddenly I had in my brain the presence of another it's almost like somebody taking over my body, but not really taking over. They were only visiting in my brain and began extracting memories. Now, mind you, I'm conscious the whole time and quite aware of what's going on around me. My associate is going into a panic, not understanding what's going on with me, and of course, I was none the better off as well. Apparently, the individual was searching for some information that perhaps had been deposited somehow in my brain when I walked through the first device days earlier at the...
What did the individual look like, briefly?
He looked like, he was about 6 foot tall. He had blonde hair, rather a reddish tan skin, I would estimate. I mean, he was very human as far as I could see. Had perhaps in his late 20s. Now, following the termination of this incident, which was quite a shocking experience for me because I thought the individual was extracting all of my memories with him when he exited. He exited through the third eye area.
Yeah.
How that's possible, I haven't a clue. But at that time, I had the sensation he was taking all of my memories with him, but that turned out not to be the case. There was quite a number of after effects, but the immediate after effect was that I was like a scared chicken looking for a corner to hide in.
Mm-hmm.
I jumped up and pointed directly at this individual as he turned to leave the room, and my associate took off running. Her name has been mentioned in Tim Cook's book, Melanie King I'm referring to.
Yeah.
She took off on a dead run and went right out the door, ran right past this individual and stopped about 10 feet further down and looked right in his eyes as he walked right past her.
Yes.
She indicated that it's as if she wasn't even there. He didn't even see her. Yet at the same time, she saw in his eyes, the pupils of his eyes.
What were they like?
Well, she described them as kind of diamond-shaped, only she said there was kind of like a cat's eyes, only they were turned sideways instead of up and down.
Right, briefly, why do you think, you must have a theory on this, maybe you've heard some theories on it, why do you think aliens are visiting us?
Well, it's difficult to say anything other than just pure speculation, one not knowing precisely what the motive is.
Well, it's pure speculation again, because the implications for mankind are very, very great. Why are we here?
Well, there's significant evidence to suggest that perhaps we did not originate here. We possibly were planted here. In fact, we might even be some form of genetic experimental project as a species.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. One of the more telling implications would be simply this. We can estimate how long human beings have been on the planet Earth. You can take your wildest estimate as to, according to anthropologists, and back it up 50,000, 100,000, 250,000 years, whatever you'd like to go.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we account for the most recent data that really started in 1976, when I was at NASA? We had the Viking mission. And on the Viking mission to Mars, we got some extraordinary photographs of a region called Cydonia.
Yeah.
And in this region, there was a sculpture that was 1,400 feet up off of the Martian floor surface, and it was 1 mile long, a little more than a kilometer.
Why didn't we hear about this?
Well, you have. It has been made public of late because the United States has agreed to return to that region on the Mars Observer Project in 1992 and re-photograph. But this sculpture, Nikki, is incredible. It's 1 mile long and it's a sculpture of a human face with eyes, the pupils of the eyes. You can even count the teeth. And the implication is simply this. From the use of Hartmann's model for crater dating, established that the age of this sculpture is from 200 million to 500 million years old.
Well, that's incredible. Well, Bob Exler, thanks very much for joining us tonight from Washington. It's been good to speak to you.
My pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Right, Tim, briefly, before I play a record, we're going to try and get this guy Bob Lazaro on later on, who has worked on an alien craft. That was fairly extraordinary stuff there at the end about the statue. Do you know about this?
I know a little about it. I haven't done a serious research effort into the Mars program, unfortunately. I hope to in the future.
Mm-hmm. He seems fairly hard hit by that encounter with the alien. He's It seemed to be quite traumatic for him.
I think so, yes.
All right, we'll have some music and we'll come back later on with some more questions. Or being lent or captured their crashed craft. And indeed, we have got some of their dead bodies. Not sure if there's any alive ones here at the moment. Now, Tim, tell me the significance of Bob Lazar, who I'm about to speak to.
Well, this is of tremendous significance because Bob Lazar is a physicist who was employed by the United States Department of Naval Intelligence the latter part of 1988 and early 1989, and he claims that he was actually hired specifically to work on the propulsion system of a recovered or otherwise acquired extraterrestrial vehicle. He didn't believe it at first. I mean, we can talk to him about that. But he actually saw it being test flown, and he's handled some of the materials that are used in its propulsion.
Hello, Bob Lazar. How are you?
Hello.
Nice to speak to you.
Same here.
So tell me, when you were first told you were going to work on an alien craft, it must have come as a surprise to you.
Quite. However, I was never told out flat that I was going to work on an alien craft. It was explained to me that I was going to be working on advanced propulsion techniques, and it was left at that.
When did you realize it was an alien craft?
The day I saw the craft.
What did it look like?
It looked like a typical flying saucer. I say typical in that it looked like two inverted saucers, a flying saucer-shaped craft. Though to me that didn't prove it was an alien craft. I thought this was something the United States was working on, just some sort of electrical field propulsion system or gravitational propulsion system. But the real shock came when I got to see the inside of the craft and noticed that the seats and control systems and everything was very small. And this corroborated some information that I was reading in briefings that they had given me, specifically pertaining to the origin of the craft, that it was of alien origin.
Well, what sort of material was it made of?
Well, it was metallic. What type of metal, I don't know. I'm not a metallurgist, and the metal felt cool as any metal would sitting in the shade, so I really can't attest to the strength of the metal, how heavy it is, or anything along those lines.
What about inside? I mean, were the seats leather or what?
No, everything was metallic. It was as if it was produced in an injection mold. There were no sharp corners anywhere. Everything was had a molded, rounded shape to it, all made exactly of the same material.
What about the control panel? What was that like?
There were three, I guess you can call them control panels. Obviously, most of it had been taken out from what I had seen. Some it looked like they had some difficulty in removing it just because of the condition of the cuts to remove the subsystems. But most of the equipment along those lines was taken out of the craft, but there were only two left, three control panels, control systems that were sitting there.
And without getting too technical, do we understand this technology, or is it still way beyond us?
The technology is way beyond us, but for the most part we do understand the basics. It does require some correction to our physics as we know it. Physics as we know right now, the whole basis of how the craft is propelled, it's propelled by using gravity. Now, we know very little about gravity. We know almost nothing. We only know its effects. We don't know how to produce it artificially. We know very, very little about it. But here is a system that uses it for propulsion, and we basically understand how the gravitational wave is produced, how it's amplified, how it's focused at long distances. Physics does not understand this now, but this is what I learned in the program, and how to produce the tremendous amounts of energy it requires to set up these artificial gravitational fields.
How many more people, apart from yourself, were working on this?
22 that I know of.
And what level of security were you on?
The level of security they call majestic.
What does that mean?
That's, from what I'm told, 38 levels above Q clearance, which is supposedly the civilian top secret clearance.
Did you at any stage have any contact with people or have any contact yourself with cryogenic bodies, with alien bodies or live aliens or anything like that?
No, the only time, and I can never see anything for sure when it comes to this. In fact, I shouldn't even mention it because I just can't. I can't put my finger on it, so I'm just going to say no.
Okay, that's fair enough. Have you any trouble from the authorities because of the information that you've divulged?
A tremendous amount initially when they were preventing me from releasing the information, but after the information was released, it's been more of a hands-off approach.
Why do you think that is?
I think any interaction now with my life or preventing me from saying anything would really just attest to the information that I've given out.
Because you're in a very privileged position now, aren't you? Because you are some way towards knowing all about this technology. And think of all the physicists in the world, all the scientists in the world, what they would do to get the information that you have.
Well, those are the people mainly that I've been communicating with, and some people that can use the information. In fact, in some of the radio interviews I've done, just to release the information to the general public, it's very difficult to describe what's going on and how physics really works and how these crafts operate by just words without pictures.
Mm-hmm.
That's why in the future I plan on putting together some sort of videotape so someone can see with the aid of graphics.
And did this thing actually have a test flight?
Excuse me?
Did this alien craft actually have a test flight?
Yeah, several times.
You saw it flying?
Yes. Yes, the only time I saw this fly up close was when I was out at the site. The craft had been taken out of the hangar by the time I had arrived. It was sitting out in the desert area, and I was perhaps, I don't know, maybe 50 to 100 feet from it, something in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And it began to lift off the dry lake bed, fairly silently, with the exception of a small hiss, like an electrical.
Who was driving it?
That I don't know.
And did it go very far?
It lifted up perhaps 30 to 50 feet, became silent. The electrical hiss noise went away, and then it shifted over to the left out of sight and came back over to the right. A very short duration test.
Just briefly, Bob, maybe it's conjecture, maybe it's knowledge. How many of these craft do you think are in the in the hangars and are in the Air Force bases of the U.S. military?
I know of 8 specifically. I don't know about any other ones.
Well, Bob from Vegas, USA, thanks very much for joining us tonight. Been fascinating speaking to you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Bob Lazar. So there's a man who really has had a hands-on experience, Tim Good, with one of these things. Does he strike you as a genuine man? Because I know you've
Yes, he does. I spent a lot of time with him last year and researching into this whole area and speaking with other people who claim to have had extraordinary experiences in the area. In fact, Gene Huff is right now with Bob Lazar. He's one of the people I interviewed who claimed to have seen one of the test flights from a distance of about 10 to 15 miles.
Mm-hmm. I think we've lost Bob Lazar, so we don't have Gene Huff on the phone, but I'll take your word for that. Well, I'm going to play a record. I'm sure there's some people with some questions for you that have arisen from this whole thing as well. Right now, some blues from Buddy Guy. Absolutely jammed all evening. It's Christine Baker from Cumbernauld, Glasgow. Hello, Christine.
Hello.
You've got an interesting story to tell. Tell it. The first time you've ever done so as well.
Well, about 20 years ago, my mother, my brother and myself were coming back from my grand's, and there was actually a tax office being built. It wasn't built, it was just like rubble, and we were going through this part, and we thought, this is a funny looking plane, because it was giving off a humming noise, and it was erratic in the sky. One minute it would shoot fast, the next minute it would slow down, and suddenly it came right beside us, and a big beam came out, and my brother and myself felt drawn towards it, but my mother was shouting, run, and the next thing we knew was we were at our door, and my father was saying, you're very, very late. Seemingly, I don't know how long we were, how late we were, but It was very, very unusual experience. My mum was very scared. We were very drawn towards it. After that, I started to have dreams that came true. A red mark appeared in my forehead. My brother is actually still sees UFOs. He's living somewhere else.
It's interesting. I'll just stop you for a second there. Now, Tim Good, she started to have dreams that came true. This would tie in with what Bob Exler was saying earlier on about the very, very profound effect on his own mental state that this experience, his experience with aliens.
Absolutely, yes. Many people report that they become more perceptive, if you like, following a UFO encounter.
Now, yeah, back to you, Christine. You joined the RAF some years later, did you?
Yes, I did, when I was about 19, and I joined the RAF and I became a telephonist, and I actually had 3 UFO calls, people calling in, and because I had my experience when I was younger, I didn't think anything of it. I just, went to log it in the book, and my sergeant actually started to laugh, and so did other people, and he told me to shove it onto the guard room, although I shouldn't really give this information out, but they didn't know that I had experienced a UFO because I had never said to them, but inside I knew that this was wrong, really, but at the same time I didn't want to be laughed at myself by saying, well, I've experienced it, I know what they feel like, because the first call I got was a woman in Scotland who'll be able to verify it if she's listening in. She called Uxbridge, and she was having a barbecue, and I'm sure it was from Aberdeen in Scotland she was phoned from, and she said the stars were moving about. The second call I got was a guy.
And you weren't allowed to report these?
No, I wasn't allowed to put it down the logbook.
Well, listen, we're going to have to move on, but Christine, that's fascinating, and listen, thank you very much for talking about it for the first time.
Can I just say to my brother, who I know will be listening, that I'll speak to him on Saturday, because he's had a lot of experiences too that's happened to him after it.
Well, thanks for sharing them.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's on the green line. It's the green line. It's Beverly Bean. Hello, Beverly.
Hello.
Your father saw aliens in New Mexico.
That's right. My father died in February 1986. And while he was dying, he was trying to tell us about something he was involved in a place called Roswell, New Mexico. He said he'd done something for Uncle Sam and it was all hush-hush. And in his sleep, he was sort of tossing and turning and worrying about something to do with this place. Me and my mum and my sisters had never heard of this place. And after he died, we kept thinking to ourselves, what on the earth could he be talking about? And what could he have done that was so fantastic? And the only thing that we could think of was this sort of UFO story he told us about half a dozen times when we were kids. And actually, when we were kids, we used to laugh about it and giggle, not really take much notice, but it's the only thing that we could think of that my dad had ever done, that was anything sort of hush-hush. And then one day my sister was watching TVAM and Timothy Good was on it talking about a book he'd just written. Mm-hmm. And he mentioned this place, he was talking about UFOs, and he mentioned this place, Roswell, New Mexico. And, we couldn't believe it. We thought, perhaps there's a bit of truth to it or something. And my husband asked a man that he worked with that read UFO books if he'd ever heard of the place Roswell, New Mexico. And this guy said, yeah, it's a really well sort of documented story about a crashed disc that came down in the desert in 1947.
Yeah.
And he gave us a book to read. And meanwhile, we searched through my dad's old papers and everything, and we found quite a few bits and pieces with Roswell, New Mexico written on them, dated 1948. And we actually found a pass for the NCO club dated July the 7th, 1947, when this was supposed to have happened. And when we read the book, the man that was telling most of the story in the book, a Major Jesse Marcel, who went out and recovered all the wreckage and everything, he was actually my dad's major. And I've got papers with his name on it.
And what did these aliens look like that he saw in New Mexico?
Well, he said that all available men were grabbed and they had to go and stand guard duty around this crashed disc. And him and another guy had to sit guard duty on the back of one of these trucks, a coverall. And these aliens were in it. And me and my sisters argue about how many. One of my sisters says 3, I say 2. These aliens were in the back. Him and another guy were told to look, but not to take anything in. But not people are like. He looked underneath the tarpaulin and saw these bodies, and they were about 3 to 4 foot tall, much larger heads than we had. Their skin colour was a bit Asian-y looking, yellowish, large slanted eyes, and at this point we used to giggle when we were kids, and we used to think it was crazy. And we used to say, weren't you scared, Dad? And he'd say, hell no. He said, if they'd been alive, they looked like they would have been friendly. Yeah. And he said he also had to stand guard duty outside the hangar where all the stuff was stored, and that his commanding officer came up and said, come on, Brownie, let's have a look inside. They went inside, but they couldn't see anything because it was all wrapped up and ready to be flown out to Texas the next morning. But every time my dad told me this story, and my sisters as well, he'd always finish up by saying, whatever you do, don't tell anyone, you get Daddy into a lot of trouble. And we just couldn't believe how this story all came together. And since then, Timothy Good's helped us find other people involved. And we've even met somebody that was stationed there and knew my dad. And I now write backwards and forwards to him. And he said that on the base at that particular time, it was common knowledge to everyone that it happened and it had all gone on, sort of thing.
Well, it's been fascinating hearing that, Beverly, and thanks very much for calling tonight.
Yeah, that's okay. I was a bit nervous doing it, sorry.
Oh, you were a star. You did it like a dream. Listen, Leighton Williams is on the yellow line here. Leighton, you've got a question for Timothy Good.
Yeah, that's right. How much of the material that is released to UFO researchers by sources in the intelligence community is actually disinformation?
I think quite a bit of it's disinformation, Leighton. I've certainly encountered disinformation in my time, but disinformation has two sides to it. In the case of Majestic 12, you may know of this committee that I mentioned, first of all, in Above Top Secret, and I've referred to it in Alien Liaison, the new book. Majestic 12 was allegedly established under President Truman in 1947, following the recovery of at least one alien vehicle in New Mexico, which we've just heard about. Now, I was given a document which I reproduced in Above Top Secret, and I've since learned that at least one of the pages is most probably fraudulent, but it has led me to be able to corroborate the existence of an actual Majestic 12 committee, and it has been confirmed by a number of very high-level sources.
So why this disinformation?
It can be used to throw people off the scent, and it can sometimes be used to help people in their search for the truth.
But sure as anything, what we heard there by Beverly Bean and her father actually seeing two alien bodies, there's no disinformation there, is there?
I don't think so, not at all, no. Not having spoken to Beverly and her sisters and her mother.
Are you worried about other documents? Are you worried that government...
I always worry about authenticity of documents, authenticity of information. And sometimes it's very, very difficult to sort the wheat from the chaff.
Thanks for calling, Leighton. Right now, it's 11:30 with the latest news. We go over to the newsroom.
Music Radio 1 FM.
On Radio 1 FM. The fear, do you ever have that anxiety that you're being led a merry dance?
Absolutely. I wake up in the middle of the night worrying about it. Particularly with the sort of extraordinary information that I've been given by Bob Lazar and Bob Exler.
So maybe you are?
Well, there's been so much corroboration from independent sources. If you consider the fact that a former director of the National Security Agency and a former director of Naval Intelligence have confirmed this, and this is not disinformation because we were warned that any public disclosure of this material would be in violation of national secrecy laws, as I said last night. Now, I decided to call their bluff and to go ahead because at the same time, although this subject is the most sensitive within the most intelligence community, and one can understand that, there are very good reasons for it, at the same time there is definitely a plan, and I have learnt this from a number of sources.
Cosmic Journey.
Cosmic Journey is just one. There is a plan to reveal and release some of this information to the public.
Well, we touched on all that last night. The implications are absolutely enormous.
They are.
For society, for mankind, for governments, for religions, but there we must lead it. There we must leave it. Do you reckon that is where it's going to lead to? That's the next step, this Cosmic Journey exhibition,
or something similar? Yes, I'm hopeful that some movie material might be released in the near future, relating to a possible landing of aliens at Holloman Air Force Base back in 1964. That's one piece of material that I'm looking forward to the release of, and others as well.
There are those, of course, who will not believe a thing until they see aliens on the Terry Wogan show.
Absolutely.
But thanks very much for coming in tonight as well. And thank you for all your calls and your interest. Non-stop music till midnight.